Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Under Review with Jared John. Each episode will analyze the impact the sports world has on society, such as gender equality, race, economy, history, and much more. So step up to the plate and come listen in. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for episode 4 of Under Review with Jared John. Today I have another very, very special guest who I'm pleased to have on the show. To give a little background for the viewers, she attended Montclair State University and she was a 3-time All-American during her time there. In 1979, she was on the first U.S. women's basketball team to win a gold medal. She holds the collegiate women's scoring average record of a career with 31.7 points per game and also in a season with 38.6 points per game. She's a former president and general manager of the New York Liberty of the WNBA for 14 years. She was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 1994 and was inducted in the Montclair State Hall of Fame. Now she's back at her alma mater as an associate vice president for strategic alliances, economic development, and civic partnership. It is my great pleasure to welcome Carol Blazejowski on the show. Ms. Blazejowski, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for doing this. I told my grandfather how this might possibly happen, and I told him, I was like, well, do you know who Carol Blazejowski is? And he goes, oh, she was something special. So just to see his reaction, clearly you could see how you impacted his life and how he's so great to have seen you play. So that brings me to my first question. What was it like playing back then, and also what was it like having fame in your life?
Well, first, I want to thank you, grandfather, for remembering me because my career was a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was a day and age where it was challenging to be a woman athlete and a women's basketball player. There wasn't much support of women as athletes on the playing fields. And here at Montclair State, it was a Division III school, and we didn't have any scholarships, so I wasn't recruited. But it was one of the highlights of my career, of starting somewhere and building and getting all the way to the first ever women's Final Four. So while it was challenging, it was rewarding, it was satisfying, and hopefully I hope that I made some sort of impact in the sport of women's basketball and women's sports in general.
Of all your accomplishments throughout your career, which one are you the most proudest of, and you're happy to have done that?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of them, and one of them was the Final Four here at Montclair State. That was back in 1978, well before you were born.
Yes.
But also another highlight for me was really making the 1980 Olympic team. For your listeners out there that may be a little older, they'll remember that the women's basketball first started in the Olympics in 1976. I tried out for that team and I was cut. So I waited another 4 years to compete and worked my tail off to make that team. Made the team, was the captain of the team, and then there was a little political happening between Afghanistan, Russia, and the United States, and we never ended up going to Moscow that year. So while I never competed in Moscow in 1980, I'm still an Olympian. So that was a very rewarding moment for me. And then also making the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame. I mean, as a youngster growing up on a court playing basketball by myself, never in my wildest dreams that I think that a woman could be in the Basketball Hall of Fame, let alone me. But it happened, and that was a thrill of a lifetime to know that you're eternally etched in the memorials up there with all the greats in men and college and pro and everything else. So for me, that was really an enormous highlight.
One question is, why the number 12? Like, did it have any significance, meaning to you as you proudly wore that jersey?
I get that question a lot. I'm really about balance. I'm a Libra, not that this has anything to do with it, but I'm a Libra, and 12 is a nice, balanced, even number. And I always wanted to be 1, but if I couldn't be 1, I could only be 2 and never go beyond that. So I figured 12 would work for me.
Back when you played basketball compared to now, do you feel like there has been any change regarding the public I know like the public now with like social media, it tends to be a little bit more difficult for players to compete.
Oh, I think the change has been remarkable. I mean, back when I played, there wasn't any funding or support for women's programming in sports, whether it be in the grassroots level, whether it be in the high school level, college level, no scholarships. Like I said, there was an Olympic team. And so you were really somebody that was the exception rather than the rule. You were someone who was looked at that was kind of odd that you even wanted to play sports. I think today it's socially acceptable. It's the rite of passage, right? I think that the opportunity for women in sports is just beyond what I ever anticipated in business, in sports, in all different industries. And athletics is one of those vehicles that can get you places that you never thought you could go because it's so unique in terms of the camaraderie, in terms of the public acceptance of sports in general with our society. But I think women now still have a road to climb, but we're making progress. We're making progress. So I like now that when I was with the Liberty, I used to sit in games and see not just the mothers coming with the daughters, but the fathers coming with the daughters now. And thinking, oh my God, I just don't have to worry about getting my son a scholarship and my son can have opportunities. But my daughter can actually have opportunities now. And so that was when the playing field for me started shifting. And I knew that we were making an impact. So, hopefully, again, I had something to do with that a little bit just by generating awareness, right? And for the sport of basketball and beyond.
Why choose Montclair State University? Was it just because you were from New Jersey and maybe it was nearby, or was it just something of the school that kind of grabbed you towards it?
I knew nothing about colleges when I was in high school. Absolutely nothing. My sister went to Seton Hall. She was a nurse. I had a cousin who went to Montclair State who was an art major here. Again, there was no Title IX. There was no women's basketball scholarships. I knew my next move was on to college. I was an athlete, no opportunities, be a gym teacher. My cousin had said that they have a great education program here at Montclair, which they did. Why don't you apply? My gym teacher at the time was friends with the then head coach, Kathy Paskert, and made a phone call. And I talked to Kathy Paskert, and she said, well, we'd love to have you. I heard all about you. And kind of that's how it went. I grew up in Cranford, so it was close. Middle class, parents couldn't afford anything else, no scholarship. So, I packed my bags and came up here.
You have talked about the impact now regarding the women's basketball. Do you feel like when you were currently playing that in your mind, like you are impacting the world as people saw you play? Or do you feel like never in your wildest dreams would it come to what like the WNBA is now and for female athletes in general?
I was very competitive as an athlete and I guess overall as a person. And I was just fighting to win games and to build parity in what women were given versus men, whether it be gym time, whether it be 2 uniforms, whether it be a full schedule and equal meal money. That's all I wanted was the opportunity. So I never thought of myself as somebody who was on a soapbox trying to fight for, this big world in the future. I was more a pioneer that just wanted what was fair. And, slowly but surely in time, things started to evolve. Title IX came, we had scholarships. The Olympics started in '76 on a world stage, with broadcasting. And then, of course, the WNBA. That was the next thing that put us out front as a leader. And where then women could also be recognized not only as great athletes, but role models. And young girls and young boys had an opportunity to see them play in major arenas and on television and realize that, they could aspire to be them someday.
Yes. When you were playing, did you receive any criticism or hurtful comments while you were going throughout your season or in the Olympic Games?
Oh, all the time. All the time. As I said, I was the exception rather than the rule. I was told, get off the court. You can't play. Your place isn't at home. So I just bought a basketball and went down to the court, and oftentimes I was the only one with the ball, and if the guys wanted to play, they had to use my ball, and that meant I had to be in the game. So that's kind of how it went for me. But all those quizzical looks, nasty side comments, but I think ultimately I persevered and I loved the game so much. I just wanted to play and felt like I should be there. I just stayed and eventually got in a game. And then it's funny, as soon as they saw that I was capable and could shoot the ball, oftentimes I'd be the first pick after that. It was hurtful, but it's okay. It was worth it.
I remember my cousin, they grew up in New York City, and he always told me New York City is like the one spot where basketball is famous there. And we played a pickup game, and this woman wanted to play, and so she went on our team. She was the last pick, so we could get an equal 5-on-5 game. And it was after she drove the ball down the court and did a scoop layup, everyone was kind of like on their heels as, oh, like she could play. So I do feel like there still is some criticism in that manner, like the men look at the women as they can't play or maybe move aside, but yet Montclair State actually has shown with Katie Sire, who played here.
Sure.
And I remember my first time broadcasting for the radio station, I saw Katie Sire play, and I was just blown away. So you could clearly see that talent in women for any sport, especially basketball here at Montclair, is exceptional. I felt like when you talked about the basketball team here, many people would talk about the women's team instead of the men's team.
Well, that's how it was when I was playing. I mean, we'd have double headers, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. And we would, the men's coaches, we'd play a game prior to them at 6 o'clock. The men would play at 8, and we'd have a pack house in Panzer Gym. I'm telling you, not only was we at capacity, we were out the door to Normal Avenue. This was back my junior and my senior year. That's how popular we were here. And when the game would end, the crowd would flood out, and the men's coaches would say, close the door, don't let them out, don't let them out, because they'd have no fans to stay in the gym and see them play. But, the women's game is a lot different than the men. If you manage expectations, you're not going to see the crazy, one-on-one plays with the dunks and the highlight reel. But what you'll see is a real cerebral game, a very skilled game. The passion, the competitive, it's equal to what the men play. It's just at a different level. And it's enjoyable. A lot of people can relate. A lot of men can relate to that. They can't relate to the LeBron James, dipsy doodle slam, but they can relate to some of the women in terms of their skill level and just how they see the court and how they do the executions.
How do you feel in terms of the pay gap? When you see players like Steph Curry receive these massive deal contracts, but yet a player like Maya Moore, not receive that same credit, and she's an exceptional player for the WNBA.
Look, it's all about economics, right? Men's basketball has been around forever. They were 1936 in the Olympics. The women weren't in there until 76. The NCAA has been around since the early 50s for the men. For the women, it was only in the 80s. It's going to take time and patience to get to to close that gap. I don't think we'll ever get there. I think it's about economics, because the bottom line is it's about television ratings. It's about fan appeal, and they're drawn to the men's game and men's athletics right now. Men's sport has been around a long time. A lot of people don't know that the NBA was at bankrupt, Wow. So you talk about the WNBA, and it's only 22 years old. When I first started in 1997 with the league, the media, I remember at my press conference, so how long do you think the league will be around? And they said, 5 years? I said, oh, well beyond that. And they said, there's no way. And I said, we'll see. And here we are at 22 years, and I think everyone has to recognize that it takes time to build. It takes time to change societal views. It takes time to change people's understanding of how to buy a season ticket for a women's game, how to buy, a box office ticket, how to support it with viewership, how to do all these kind of things that for years they've gone to giant games, right? Grandfathers, great-grandfathers have handed the tickets down. So they all know how to be fans, right? But this is a different audience. And so Maya Moore, I feel her pain. It's a slow go. It's all about time and patience. It may not be in her lifetime, but we're making hay. And, the money that the NBA brings in, they can afford to pay these players. The seating capacity in buildings are sold out. For WNBA games, they're not. They have a great broadcast schedule. the WNBA has ESPN is a great partner, but it's not at the level that the NBA has. So, look, it's all about the money. You generate more money, you get paid more money. All right? No one's disputing the talent and the interest, but they are disputing the economics that go behind it. So it's only commensurate with the income that's made.
I feel like in the WNBA games, you might not see high fly dunks as the men's basketball, but as you mentioned, you will see competitiveness. You will see, heart being poured out onto the court. I just feel personally, I don't watch as many WNBA games throughout the season, but I feel like that also comes in terms of advertising. So when ESPN, they'll advertise a NBA game, for weeks to come, say if it was December, they'll do it for January, in terms of like the ABC, night specials. But for the WNBA, I just don't see as much advertisement as being done. And I see that as a problem to maybe if more advertising was done, then more fans could approach the game or could, check it out the game maybe a little bit and see what's it about. I don't think people really understand the way. I don't even think people know how long a WNBA game is.
You're right.
How many quarters or how long are each quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if fans were to understand as they did for the NBA and if people could backtrack it, I think it also comes down to like advertising, as I said.
I think some of it does, but remember, to do advertising, you need money. Right? And so if sponsors aren't going to get the return on their investment, then they're not going to put the money forward to advertise, right? Same thing with sponsors. If a Nike, Adidas, or an Under Armour isn't going to get the sales back on a shoe that they would create for Maya Moore, then they're going to take their investment and put it elsewhere. It's just business, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, the women are innocent victims in this one. But it'll change, and we just have to keep the faith, and we have to keep doing more. We have to take the W. We have to infiltrate it more in the youth game, in grassroots recreation. It has to be a household name, the WNBA. So what are the vehicles that we can reach out to get that WNBA, iconic mark into the households? And so that'll build brand recognition and whatnot. And then it has to translate into fans coming out to watch them play. That's the bottom line.
One thing I've noticed is for March Madness bracket, if you type it into Google March Madness, the first thing that comes up is men's basketball instead of women's. And I did a March Madness bracket, probably as millions of Americans out there. And for ESPN, there was like a prize for winning the men's tournament, but the prize for the women's bracket was lower. So do you have any input on this in terms of, the search in Google if you type in March Madness, and do you have any input in general?
Well, March Madness has from the inception been associated with men's basketball. And the amount of interest within this particular time of year is enormous. I did the same thing. I was a little annoyed when I typed in March Madness that they didn't have dual brackets, right? So I had to go search around a little bit as well to find my women's bracket just so I could fill that out and follow. But I get it again, if half the world is interested in the men's bracket, and that's where you have to pour your money into and where you have to promote, and then you're drawing eyeballs to that website, right? But if they don't have any interest or knowledge other than maybe Connecticut fans or Notre Dame fans, and now probably Baylor fans,
yes.
You heard it here, I predict Baylor will win the women's Final Four. I love Gino,
yes.
Known him for a lot of years, but I think it's Baylor's year. So I experienced the same thing you did, but I think, again, in time that'll change.
Is there anything else you would like to see in terms of change in the upcoming year for women athletes in general or for basketball specifically?
Part of the problem with the W is that it's in the summertime. Kids are off of school. Everybody's running around with their families doing beaches and vacations and other things. So that's a challenge that we're going to have to figure out. Certainly it's affordable, so that's not a barrier. But I think it's just getting the players out in the public year-round. And the problem they're having is they make their primary money playing in leagues overseas. The premier players make millions playing overseas. They come back. So when we need them out and about promoting the league nationally, they're overseas. And that's part of a problem too. So they have to figure out how they can, address that. I'm not sure it can be addressed, but that's also a challenge.
Thank you, Ms. Blazejowski. I had so much fun doing this interview, and hearing your stories and hearing your input it's great for me to know more about the WNBA, and it's great to just hear your input on things.
Well, thank you, Jared. This was fun. And to all your listeners out there, if you haven't seen a women's basketball game or a women's sporting event, go for the first time and watch anything. I think you'll be surprised. And guess what? You may come back. All right, thanks again.
I agree. Players like Sue Bird and Maya Moore, I've actually seen and watched play, so it's pretty incredible, and I like watching the WNBA. Thank you guys for listening. This is the 4th episode of Under Review with Jared John. I appreciate you guys here. Ms. Blazejowski, Jared John, signing off. See you next time.